Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Zoom In Zoom Out podcast, where three woefully underqualified people, namely Aryan Chaudhary, Parth Behani, and myself, Akash Vikram Shroff, try to offer you some perspective by zooming in and out, as the name suggests, of the lives of some very qualified people, like our guest here, Mr. Kevin Wong. And effectively, what this means is that we ramble for a long time, and we have Kevin here to provide you some insights. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Akash. Today we have among us Kevin Wong. Kevin is a senior electro-optical engineer at Lockheed Martin who currently works on US missile defense systems. Before this, he used to work as a satellite engineer at Maxar, where he also helped recover a lost satellite in space, which is absolutely insane. If this isn't enough, Kevin is also a member of the US national Taiji team with two Pan American Kung Fu gold medals and a bronze at the last World Championships. Kevin also studied physics from UC Berkeley and graduated in the class of 2015, and he's also a wonderful person. Thank you so much, Kevin. We're so glad to have you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So to just give you a brief outline of how this is going to go, we have Kevin here, of course, to give you some perspective into the life of this very, very successful engineer and see his journey through how he's reached where he's come to, but more importantly, go through the failures he's been through and how he overcame them. And for the next half an hour, 45 minutes, we're going to be having this conversation to understand more of that. So to start off with, Kevin, would you like to talk about what does success mean to you and what has been some of your most happiest or most rewarding successes?
Right. So success is something that I think is very hard to define because it depends on where you want to go in life and what you want out of the effort that you're putting in. So for me personally, I think the obvious thing is work. That's something that a lot of people can relate to. I'm happy with where I am in my career. I'm at a job that I enjoy very much, doing something that I think is very interesting and meaningful. Another side of it is my personal life. So I got married last year, right before the pandemic, actually. And that has been great.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I do martial arts. I've been practicing for some time, and I'm
Yeah.
on yeah,
Yeah,
and
again, I think I really agree with you when you say that it can sometimes be very challenging to find a very general definition of success, and it's really specific to what you need and what you want from what you're doing.
mhm.
Uh, how did you define your success at your current job or when you were at school or college? What were you looking at when you looked at success, or if you want to look for a better word, growth? What did growth mean to you?
I think generally it means improving yourself and being in a place that is better than where you were. And so I don't think there's um, any kind of milestone that at least I hit in my life that I would call the point where I made it. And it's really kind of a continuous process. And so I think success to me means being in a state where you're moving forward. You're on a path to whatever you define as a better place in your life.
Are
I
there
think
any
that's
success? Yeah. Are there any successes in your life that you can think of right now, which make you happy? Like like to think about you did those things you did. Uh, are there any of those memories that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. So I do martial arts, Chinese martial arts, wushu. I specialize in Tai Chi, which a lot of people probably heard of. I do a version of Taiji that is probably not what you're thinking of, but I compete in it. And so I competed at the World Championships 2018, and I got third place
Wow.
in my event, which was exciting.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a good time. And so I think that's one of the things I'm proudest of.
I think that's wonderful because, at least in terms of martial arts, I'm not very good at it. I've done a little bit of boxing and things like that in the past.
Oh,
But
nice.
at least in terms of the impact that martial arts can have on the rest of your life, do you think that that's been a place that you can derive things like discipline and confidence from? Because I found that to be true in a lot of scenarios.
So I'm always kind of cautious about saying that martial arts has given me discipline. One, I don't really like falling into that stereotype, and two, I don't think that's really true for me. Um, what martial arts has given me in particular is learning how to be bad. And so when you're starting out martial arts, especially, you are the worst one in the class, almost definitely. And that was true for me. Um, and I was worse than I thought I was. It's always kind of a shock when you see yourself on video for the first time, and you're like, "Oh, I look like that," and you're like, you're nowhere near where you want to be. And so, martial arts is it's a sport about self-improvement and learning that it's okay not to be good at all, but learning how to take advice and take other people's input to get better. So
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
really what it's given me.
I think the same sentiment about seeing yourself on camera for the first time is what we felt when we recorded the first podcast. We looked at it and we were like, maybe this is something we can't put on the internet for life. This is something we should probably just bury.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
okay, Kevin, would you tell us a little bit about you're working at Maxar Technologies. So would you tell us what you're doing there and how that job has affected you, things like that?
Yeah. So I actually just got a new job a couple months ago at Lockheed Martin. Um, and so I'm working on U.S. missile defense systems right now. Uh, I'm in the electrical-optical group. My training is in physics. I got my bachelor's in physics 2016. But since then, I've been working in electrical systems design mostly. And so that has entailed um, kind of top level design work. Um, I work in space, and so it's involved kind of point to point wiring connections and inter-unit interfaces throughout the spacecraft, any given program that I'm working on. So that's kind of
Yeah.
a general overview.
That does sound really really fancy. Um, and I think you'd mentioned to us that at one point during your career working at Maxar or one of your previous companies, you realized you'd made a certain error in some of the analysis, and that led to having to rework a lot of things that you'd already done and making changes downstream, right? So how is that entire process like when you realize that a lot of what you worked on might have been wrong or might have gone wrong in terms of also affecting your colleagues' work and this huge project that you're working on, which being something like Boeing, being missile systems would definitely be quite complicated and expensive and important, right? So how did you deal with that and grow from that?
So, um, It was embarrassing, mostly. My first thought was like, oh my God, I've messed this up. Um, and I think the hardest part was making myself go tell my boss that I had done this wrong. Um,
Yeah.
so and I found the error because there was a further part of the program that I was working on that depended on my calculations from earlier. And so I was going back and looking over my own work and realized that I had made a few errors in the calculations. And so I think something that you learn very quickly when you're working in industry is that your work isn't just kind of you finish it and then it's done. There's a lot of dependencies. And so when I'm done with my work, I pass it on to someone else and then they go do something else with it. And well, in this case, the person that I passed it on to was me because I was working a couple of different roles on the program. And so I had to track down everything that had depended on my incorrect analysis. And I had to make sure that all that got cleaned up. And then, yeah, it was kind of rough.
Yeah. It sounds like it could have been quite exhausting, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, at that moment, do you sort of lose faith in yourself, or how do you convince yourself that you can still keep doing what you're doing and make sure that you don't have any other errors? Or
So I think something that a lot of people struggle with and that I struggled with to a certain degree is imposter syndrome. And so this was in the first couple years in my career, and so I still felt like I didn't know what I was doing. I was afraid that at any moment someone would point to me and be like, "This guy's not a real engineer. Get him out of here." And so when I realized that I had made this error, I was like, "This is it. It's over. It's done. I should just, turn in my resignation now."
yeah.
But you kind of. I think something that's good is that you can't give in to that. There's no choice when other people's work depends on your work. You got to just own up to it. And so that's what I had to do, and so I did it. I went to my boss and said, "Hey, so that analysis that I worked on half a year ago, well, it's wrong." So, and then, it was, and I think it's always kind of, you make it out to be a lot worse in your head than it actually is. And so, he was cool. He was like, "Yeah, just fix it." And that's really kind of what it is. You fix it. You make sure that it is right for the next person who comes along. And then that's it. You learn from it, you grow from it, you move on.
I think it's quite heartening for all of us to hear that even someone like you still faces imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if it's disproportionate to tech, but I think people in tech are just more vocal about it. I'm sure every industry faces it, but as the three of us are trying to get into tech, I'm sure we've faced imposter syndrome at some point. Do you think does it get better as you moved along in your career? Has your self-confidence improved, or do you think it's something that still afflicts you and you have to keep working on it?
Yeah, it definitely gets better. I think anytime you jump, my new role now has been kind of a diagonal jump from where I was previously, and so again I'm kind of facing, oh, I'm a senior engineer now. What does that mean? But as you talk to other people and kind of new faces come in, you realize, hey, they are now where I was 3 years ago. and that makes you realize, that you're not where you were 3 years ago. And so I think recognizing that you have grown in that time is something that's very important and something that's very helpful in overcoming imposter syndrome. And also, I think the recognition that everybody kind of faces this. Talking to people 5 years my senior, they're also like, yeah, I worry that, people are going to realize I have no idea what I'm doing. Why are they coming to me for advice? I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's a ubiquitous feeling, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think I really agree with Akash when he says that it's really heartening to know that somebody like you is also going through something very similar to what a couple of us feel now. Um, what do you think about your failures? Like when you think about them in hindsight, when you look back at like failing through your maybe once or twice in your jobs, or before that, what do you just think about your failures now once you like reach the level you're at?
Some of my failures, I think, when I think back on them, and I think we all have this sometimes. I'm like, why did I do that? You know, that was unnecessary. I didn't have to say that. I didn't have to throw that negative sign in there. I should have checked my work. Um, but I think even those have taught me something, and so I think um, something that helps me think about my failures without kind of wallowing in this crushing sense of inadequacy is to realize that without them, I wouldn't be where I am now. So
Yeah.
So,
if I hadn't, had that experience of doing that power analysis incorrectly and learning that I need to talk to someone if I'm unsure of what I'm doing, then I think I'd be a lot less successful in my career now.
do you think you still fail? Like do you still fail, or has it
Oh, yeah.
become lesser, or um, but and it has your gratitude towards your failure, like you just mentioned, helped you in overcoming any obstacle that like failures get to you? Like sometimes failures can just be more. That this is what I think. That failures can just be more than like an offset that you face because of like not meeting a certain milestone or something. Or they can also be burdening, like emotionally. uh, uh, has your gratitude helped you like sometimes combat that emotional burden that failure gets, that I'm probably like the emotional, like let's say feeling can probably kick back the imposter syndrome? Is that something which you faced, and how's your gratitude helping you with it?
Uh, yeah, so I think failure is something that you don't really get over. You, there's no point where um, you're ever like, okay, I win at everything I do now. You know, um, I think it does. Um, well, I hope that I'm failing less often now. I think when situations arise that I've dealt with in the past, um, the hope is that I'm dealing with them better now because, well, as we like to say in physics, it's a previously solved problem, right? And so um, learning from your failures in the past helps you deal with them as they come up later on.
Uh, Definitely, I fully agree with that. And I just want to segue a little bit into your college experience because you mentioned to us that you weren't able to qualify for a minor you wanted to study. Could you just tell us why that was and how that affected you? Things like that.
Right. So something that I think is kind of funny to think back on now is that I wasn't a very good student. um, let me rephrase that. I was a terrible student. Okay. And going into college, I didn't know that. So I had a plan, right? I was gonna get my PhD and become a professor in physics. Um, I was gonna be the next Nobel Prize winner. But I hit college, and then I realized, it's hard to study when you're not forced to. And so my grades went down quite a bit. And so that was something that I think was very hard for me to deal with, having to kind of cope with this realization that I actually hate studying. And how do I deal with that? But yeah, so I wanted to get a minor in environmental engineering or some kind of engineering, and environmental engineering was the one that I picked. So that increased my workload, which in hindsight was not a good idea. But yeah, so in order to get the minor, you needed above, I think it was a C average in the courses for that minor. And C average, doesn't sound like it should be very hard to achieve, and yet somehow it was. And so by the time I graduated, I had to kind of give up on that. So I contented myself with just getting my bachelor's in physics, and I was like, okay, that's it. No more school for me. I'm done. I'm out.
Do you think I don't want to be wrong when I'm saying this, but somewhat of a failure at school there motivated you into achieving the great things that you did later on? Is it fair? And like, could you derive some kind of failure motivation from, like, not having, like, not getting that minor that you wanted, something like that?
I think so, yes. I think failing at school forced me to think more about what I wanted to do in my life. There was a point in my undergrad when, I was up 4 a.m., trying to get done my homework that was due 2 weeks ago. And I was like, do I really want to do this for another 7 years? Am I really going to get that PhD? And then after that, am I really going to become professor and do research and stay in this world? So I think being bad at school really kind of shook me, and I had to look for something else that I wanted to do. And so that was, it was, I think, a very necessary, a necessary thing for me to go through.
And what do you think? Like I think I've heard this a lot of times. The phrase "grades don't matter." What do you think? What do you think when somebody says grades don't matter? Do you agree with it? Uh,
No, not really. Grades matter quite a bit, but they don't matter, I think, in the way that a lot of people think. Grades, having a high GPA is very important if you want to get a higher degree. If you want to get a PhD, then yes, you're going to want to keep your GPA up. But I think I graduated with a 2.7, right? So it was important, I think, for me to realize that this number is not a high enough number to get into a physics PhD program. And So grades, I think, are something that you should use to gauge where you are and where you want to be, and is there a realistic path for you to get there? Because if you're, second year in college and you're at a 3.0, right, then you need to ask yourself, am I okay with this? And if you are okay with that, then cool. But if you're not, then what are you going to have to do to get into a grad school? So I think it's not a number that you need to care about just because your parents say that you need to, or because you need to get a certain number. But it's important for you to gauge yourself and where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because at least for a lot of us going from high school into college, at least speaking for myself and a few others, I think Akash and Ari as well, we have this sort of illusion about how grades, getting that high grade is important, not just for us to know where we're at, but because of how everyone else sees us and what we've been told is important to get, or what we've been told is this good grade or the grade that you should have. And just like transitioning from that to understanding that the grade can help you understand more about yourself and not necessarily that important in terms of outside perspectives could be quite helpful.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think a lot of us can. But I think it's important to keep in mind that your GPA is only part of your picture, right? So it's, I think, good to keep in mind that it's not just about the grades. I mean, when I'm applying to jobs now, nobody cares. If you're in industry, your whatever GPA you had in college is, I think, a lot less important than the experience you've gained through internships or previous jobs or whatnot. And of course, nobody cares about my high school GPA nowadays. Although, I mean, that kind of sucks because it's a lot higher than my undergrad GPA was.
I think I think we all, and not us all. I think I can really relate to that, because I remember having like a really good GPA early on in school, and then when I took like too much on my plate, I
Aryan,
really
second
messed up.
standard doesn't count. Your GPA for second standard does not count.
I'm still fixed on like my second standard GPA. I got straight A's that semester. I got 2 ice creams. I remember. No, but what learning style did you like use for your academics? Was it the learning style which is going wrong, or was it just lack of interest per se?
I think something that I realized is that I'm a really bad procrastinator.
I
And
think that's something a lot of us can relate to.
yeah, it's a common problem. But it hit me really hard because in high school it was fine. I could finish my homework, and this isn't something that I'm necessarily proud of, but I would finish my calculus homework in class right before the teacher collected it.
Oh,
And yeah, and that was something that I could do in high school. Doesn't really fly in college. If you have a week to complete an assignment, you really can't complete it in a few hours. Like, it doesn't work. So I think it wasn't really any learning style per se, but more of a work ethic problem.
Yeah. And I guess, how did you go from having like that work ethic in school to obviously now in your industry, in your job, having a work ethic that's let you reach where you are? Is it just because of finding something that you were a lot more interested in, or how did you transition from that to this?
So I think something that I've discovered is that my procrastination problem mostly applies to myself. So I'll procrastinate if it's a homework assignment that I have to turn in, or if it's my taxes, which I completed a few days before they were due. But something that I found while working in industry is that if someone else depends on my work, then I can really step up and get it done because I know that other people need it. And so I think that's why working in industry has suited me a lot better because one, I don't allow myself to procrastinate in the same way that I did in undergrad. And two, I get much more of a sense of accomplishment handing off a good deliverable than I ever did when I was turning in assignments to this, box this big in a lecture hall that nobody was in.
I think that's true. Maybe for some people, because even I've come across quite a few people who weren't the best students at school per se, but they've done exceedingly well in their job, and it's just that they enjoy that more, and they're getting to do it in a work environment which they prefer. Now, just as a section that we've come up with to help our audience realize that you might be a little more like them, because obviously in the beginning you see this grand image that a lot of times people assume of others, and then you're like, maybe they're not so different from me after all. And that's what we're hoping this podcast does. So, in that sense, do you have any guilty pleasures that you enjoy doing? Anything that you turn to when you want to unwind?
I read manga. I read quite a bit. I read more than I probably should. And I'm a binger. So I think that something that is kind of a funny story is my first year in college, my first semester. The week before finals week, I had a paper due, and I wanted to get it done before final exam started. So it was 3 days before my first exam. I was like, okay, I'm gonna pull my first all-nighter. I'm gonna crank it out, get it done, and then I'll rest the next couple days so that I'm ready for my exam. So I stayed up all night. I did it, it was my first all-nighter. I spent the entire night reading Hunter x Hunter from beginning to end. Didn't get any work done. So then the next night, and I crashed the next day, of course. But the next night I was like, same thing. Okay, cool. I reread Hunter x Hunter from beginning to end. So I ended up pulling 3 all-nighters in a row without getting any of my work done. And so
I think that's quite impressive. I don't know about y'all, but that is something that.
yeah. Yeah, well, it was not super good planning on my part. I did get my paper done, but it was a rough time. My exam the next day was super rough. That's when I learned how to drink coffee. I drink a lot of coffee now. But yeah, manga. That's my probably my biggest vice.
And like, do events like this still happen to you? Do you still get these productivity slumps? And even though
It's not a productivity slump. I've been getting through Hunter x Hunter in one night is very productive.
I think it doesn't happen as often nowadays. As I said, I think quite a bit. Procrastination doesn't hit me in quite the same way when I'm working, but I do get times like when I'm supposed to be working on my taxes that I'm like, well, you know. So if you guys know So no Frieren, it's a newer manga that came out recently anyway. I read that instead of doing my taxes, and then that was like 3 months ago. And then, that kind of just kept happening. Because, so when you guys eventually are doing taxes, do them as soon as you can. Otherwise, you forget about it, and then you tell yourself you're going to do it the next week, and then the next week, and then the next month. And then, the government gives you an extension on your taxes, and you're like, okay, cool. I have even more time, but then you end up with a lot less time. So
that sounds like how it worked for quite a few of us with school extensions and deadlines for projects as well.
Yeah.
I don't think that extension worked for me. I just took that extension as a vacation for the most part. I remember I was speaking to Kevin a couple of weeks back, and Kevin likes to do this too. Think back in time and try to change something. If I remember correctly,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I asked him then, but I can't wait to ask him this again. What would you change about the course of your life if you had to change anything? Is there any decision that you'd like to retake, or any one place where you like, you know what if I just did this instead of this, or what if that happened? Like, do you have any such moment?
So I think it's a tough question to answer because it's really hard for me to gauge where I would be if I changed anything in my past. Everything that I've done, everything I've done wrong has led me to where I am now. But one thing I do kind of wish I'd done is start martial arts earlier. I started in my second year of high school, which puts me at about half the amount of experience that a lot of the people I compete with have. So I think that would give me a bit more of an edge. Other than that, I mean, one thing that I had thought about before, actually, when I was going into college, I wanted to study literature, English literature.
Oh, okay.
My parents weren't super happy about that. And so, in the end, they convinced me to go with physics. But I do wonder sometimes what my life would be like if I'd gone with it.
I remember reading about you a little bit before the podcast, and I read that you're interested in 20th century French literature. And if our audience is like me, I have no idea what that is. I'm so sorry.
Okay. I have to say, I think that's a glitch. In the I don't speak French. I don't read French.
Is that somebody else then?
I think so. I think it must be.
Yeah, Aryant, I don't think he's forgotten that he speaks French, so it's probably someone else. But
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have
But
to talk to Jin about that.
yeah, but before we wrap up, and thank you so much for like giving us all your time. I really want to ask you some questions about your Tai Chi experience. Like how, like I think we haven't discussed this as extensively as we wanted to, but
Mhm.
but in general, what is your whole martial arts journey meant to you? Because um, I know it's not common to be awarded medals and represent your national team in it. Uh, I don't think I've ever done it, or I don't know if my friends have ever done it. What does it feel like when you're representing when you're in your country in this martial art that you love?
So it's it's amazing. It's a really good time. I think it's not really what you expect. I don't. I I wouldn't say that I feel any sort of national pride or I really feel that I'm representing the United States. But um, competition, and especially international competition, I think really exemplifies everything that I love about martial arts and about doing Tai Chi and about learning and growing in this sport. When you go to competition, you are really hit with the realization of where you are in the martial arts pecking order, so to speak. And usually it's a lot lower than you think. My first time going to, well, actually, my first event in the 2018 World Championships, I got 7.2, which was it's a scoring out of 10. Usually, the first 8 placements are above 9, so that kind of gives you a sense of where I was. So that did kind of hit me hard, but I think something that I really love about it is that you meet a lot of people who are very passionate about what we do, and everybody is super willing to give you advice. You know, they're
Yeah.
all there's no kind of cutthroatness to it. If you ask somebody, hey, what do you think of doing my sword form this way instead of this way? And they'll just give you honest feedback. And I've met a lot of really good friends through competition. Um, I've made friends with a few of the members of the Hong Kong team, and now, well, before COVID, I would go over to train with them every December. And so that's something that I think has been really cool about going to competitions and competing internationally. Matt.
Yeah, that does sound like a really cool experience to have, and just
Yeah,
reaching that level and meeting all those people. Um,
yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back to an idea that you brought up at the starting about how you measure your success and your growth as these continuous steps and not like a single outcome dependent goal. And I think that was something the three of us were talking about in the previous episode about how having, like, viewing your success in that way is a lot better for yourself than having these external outcome goals. So I just wanted to ask you, how did you reach that point where you were able to do that? Because I know a lot of us start off by measuring how we're doing by those outcome goals, and how has that really helped you navigate through everything?
Mhm. I think I think this is something where doing martial arts has helped me out quite a bit because I think you would think that doing a competitive sport, it's very easy to fall into kind of I want to get first place in such and such, or
Right.
I want to be the top of my class or whatever. I think something that you come to realize is that it's very, very hard to do that.
Yeah.
There are very few people in the US who can say that they're number one internationally in anything. And so I think you kind of come to terms with the fact that you don't need to do that to call
Right.
yourself a successful martial artist. You just want to be better than you were. You want to be better at the end of practice than you were at the beginning of practice. Something that my coach told me a long time ago that has really stuck with me. He said, you go across the carpet in class doing basic exercises. He says, if you reach the end of the carpet and you haven't improved, or you haven't found something that you need to fix in your form, then you might as well not cross at all. And so that's something that I think I really take with me in every practice, is this idea that I want to find the thing that I'm going to fix today. I'm going to find this error in my technique that I'm going to overcome today. And that's something that has really helped me. And I think it's a mindset that has helped me in my life in general.
That's definitely
Yeah.
true, and I think that's a very insightful message. At least the last idea of crossing the carpet, I think that's something we can apply to almost everything we do. So before we wrap up this conversation, and it's been wonderful, do you have any message or questions that you want to leave the audience with?
I think as high schoolers going into college, I think the biggest thing that that I would want to know if I were a high schooler going into college again for the first time is that it's okay not to be what you thought you were going to be. It's okay not to maintain a 4.0 GPA, that you had in high school through your entire undergraduate career, and then go on to get your PhD and become a professor and marry a professor wife and have professor kids. Right. It's okay if your reality doesn't match up with the dreams that you came up with in high school. You don't have to imprison yourself in any kind of notion of a future that you had or you have right now. So I think that's something that would have been very helpful for me to know going in, is just keep an open mind. College is a time for you to explore and for you to fail and keep failing until you find something that you really want to do and that you want to succeed at. So,
Yeah.
don't stress.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Kevin. I think that's all the questions that we had planned for you, and it's so nice to have spoken to you today. This really brings me back to the idea, one of the ideas that helped us think of the themes and like start this podcast. It's something that one of Wharton's professors, Adam Grant, said, that when you look at somebody's resume, it's easy to it's generally like one success string to another, and it sometimes does give a holistic view of a person. And I hope that through this episode and with later episodes, we can hope to normalize superhumans in a lot of ways. And we think you've really helped us in this journey, and we're really grateful. To all our listeners, I'll have Kevin's resume and his failure resume linked to our podcast links as well, so you can really check out Kevin. And Kevin is a wonderful human being, and we're really proud to know him. And we really loved having you on our podcast.
Thank you all for listening. We hope to see you all again next time. Bye.
Yep.
Bye. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks for having me. It's a great time.